So I think probably we should go ahead and get started. I just want to say hello. My name is Margaret Schilling. I'm class of 91, but I also work for the Career Center and had the pleasure of meeting Tom a couple years ago. And I myself am also a really big fan. So welcome to everybody for being here. Am I still there? Sorry, I just got a message. I was booted out. Let me just give a few housekeeping notes for tonight. So again, if everybody would just put their name and class year, rename their box, that's really great so we can see who all is here. And in just a minute, when Tom sort of begins to speak, we're going to mute everybody just so we reduce the background noise. And if questions arise as we go through the program, you should feel free to put those into the chat. We will get to some Q&A towards the end, but that would be a nice place to save your questions. I believe that's all the housekeeping that I have. Jake Muirhead, who is going to introduce Tom and sort of proceed as sort of master of ceremonies here. So let me turn it over to you, Jake.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome everyone. I just want to tell you a little bit about Tom. He's an author, he's an illustrator, character designer, and we'll have a chance to ask, more about what these mean. He's done children's books. He's published at Netflix, Random House, Macmillan, Scholastic, Simon & Schuster, Nicktoons. He's been drawing since he was a kid, sometimes on his parents' antique table, growing up in Pennsylvania. He's a 2006 graduate of Hamilton and lives in Brooklyn, New York. And he's currently working on a bunch of projects, which we'll get to ask him about, including books. He's also published a book, or I'm not sure if this is published yet, but he's done a book on Derek Jeter. The book is Derek Jeter Presents Night at the Stadium, Don't Blink, and This is Christmas. So those books have been published already, and he's got other books and projects underway, and we're really happy to have him here. And he's going to talk about his life and what he does, and he's going to show us some of his work, and he's also going to do a little live demonstration as well.
Thank you very much, Jake.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for coming. Can everyone hear me? Can thumbs up if you can. Everything's good. Okay. So this is the first time I've done this with such a large group, so bear with me. I hope that, this goes smoothly. We're going to have sort of a casual discussion about what I'm doing these days, how I got to do what I do, how much Hamilton helped me along the way, in terms of the lessons and the values that I developed while I was there. So I'm a class of 2006. I see we have a few other classmates of 2006 here, so thank you so much. Your money is in the mail. You'll receive that later today. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe a good place to start, Tom, is you could tell us a little bit about how you got started doing what you do. Like after Hamilton, did you go to graduate school? How did you wind up in New York, and how did you get your foot in the door of this business?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I graduated, the first job that I had was actually an internship with Nickelodeon. And I was really excited about animation, and that was a world that I wanted to get into. I've always drawn ever since I was about 5 or 6. I think I see some faces in the audience who might be around that age. And I did it to copy my bigger brother. I was desperate to be just like him. And when he shifted his attention to sports, I kind of stayed the course on drawing. It just was my way of expressing myself. So anyway, back to graduating from college, I got an internship at Nickelodeon, and I was responsible for putting the shadows on characters for every frame of an animation for a show called Kappa Mikey, which I actually don't think is still on the air. But I had to also answer phones. I had to get coffee. I had to do all of those things. Not at the same time. I feel like the show might have really suffered if I tried to do all of that at once. But that was my first job. And then after that, I actually worked for a small studio called Bill Smith Studio. And that was a studio that is in the publishing space, or at least it was in the publishing space. They made textbooks. And so I was sort of getting my feet wet with graphic design. I also had a brief stint at a studio called Novo Arts, which created both traditional and digital work for corporations and residences in New York City. So I would create art of all kinds, really kind of whatever was thrown at me. And then that would be installed in corporate offices or larger residences in the city. And then I sort of felt like I was really excited about publishing. So I actually got a job at Scholastic, and that was at this point 11 years ago. I actually just left the company this past December. The reason I left is because while all of this was happening, I was drawing every day. I was coming home from work. I was writing stories. I was drawing pictures. I was, creating characters, really mostly for my own enjoyment, because it was something that I've done since I was little. And then the moment when everything sort of changed was I was introduced to someone who worked for Jeter's Turn 2 organization. It's a not organization. It's a platform for the news that is all about allowing athletes to communicate directly to their audience without having to go through the media. And this person, his name was Gary. Gary actually wanted to create a book that was inspired by the animal, I'm blanking on the name of the title of the book. He wanted to create a book and he needed an illustrator. And I was in the middle of creating some stories of my own. And he said, I would really love for you to illustrate my book. And this was a huge opportunity for me because I had never published anything yet. And I was really excited about the chance. But at the same time, I felt like I had some ideas that were worth something. And I actually decided to say, you know what, I really appreciate the offer. I think I'm actually going to try and get some of my own work published. And he said, well, what are you working on? And I showed him some of my work, some of my own stories, and he liked it so much that he then sort of gave me a direct line to the Jeter family, to Derek Jeter. Now, it's important to mention that I am not a sports fan at all. I grew up in a very big sports family. We were large people. I did play lacrosse for 14 years, played a little bit at Hamilton before I decided that I'd rather trade in the 6-foot lacrosse pole for a paintbrush, which my dad was thrilled about. I really decided that was the path that I was going to pursue. And it actually worked in my favor because I was brought in to interview Derek Jeter's sister. Her name is Charlie, and talk about this new opportunity. And what the opportunity was is that when Derek Jeter announced that he was going to finish his last season with the Yankees, there was a bidding war for his name. Basically, he wanted to get into publishing. He casually mentioned it, and every publishing house went crazy. They said, we want to be a part of this. And Simon & Schuster ended up winning out on that opportunity. And he got a 15-book deal with Simon & Schuster, which is extraordinary. Normally, the most you get is anywhere from 3 to 5, but Derek Jeter got 15. And of the 15 books that he wanted to make, he decided that he wanted to make children's books. So what I had to do to prove myself is I had to deliver work for free for about 8 or 9 months to show that I could illustrate the ideas that they were exploring and then also contribute some of my own ideas. And this was one of those moments where actually Hamilton really kind of allowed me to separate myself from the rest of the group, because not only could I illustrate, but I could write. I could communicate my ideas in written form, but then also in a meeting, I could really kind of step up and stand out in a way. And so after a lot of effort and competing with some pretty serious, talented people, I was very lucky to have my first illustration job, and I think you'll be able to see this, hopefully. Oh, maybe not. I don't know if it's, oh, there we go. So this is the first book that I illustrated, all right? And
I know
that,
that book.
I'm sorry?
I know that book.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And then after that, I was just the illustrator on that book, but they liked my ideas enough that they decided that for the next book, they wanted me to write it as well. And that was Day at the Beach. I don't know if everyone can see. Sorry, I should probably turn my background off.
Nice.
And then one of the other books that I did with them is a personal favorite. It's called This Is Christmas. Oh, and sorry.
So
Okay.
Tom, in a way, it sounds like you were in the right place at the right time, and that whole what you just described sounds to me like it was kind of like a breakthrough, and that was your entree. Do you think being in New York was really important to making those connections, or do you think that could happen anywhere?
I think today, more recently, I think it could probably happen anywhere. I think at the time it made a big difference because I was able to go to the stadium. And there's a funny story where I won't share, basically I went to the stadium and they put me in the clubhouse with the entire team. Now, remember, not a fan of sports, so I don't know who anyone is. I text messaged one friend who was a born and raised New Yorker that I was going to Yankee Stadium to meet Derek Jeter and hang out with the team. And you would have thought that my leg had some sort of tremor. I got so many text messages back that I couldn't answer because my friend was so jealous and so excited for me. Anyway, so I'm in the clubhouse, that they invited me to, and the whole team was there getting dressed, which was a little awkward. And they were watching Friends, which I thought was a little strange because you'd think that they would be listening to exciting music to get ready for the game, but they were about to play the Mets. And anyway, so I was there with them for an hour. And then I went out to the field, and that's when I met Derek. I met Derek Jeter on home plate in Yankee Stadium, and embarrassed myself thoroughly by making a bad joke, which, I was nervous. But anyway, I made an impression, and it ended up working out in my favor. And I called my dad afterwards, and I said, "Dad, you won't believe it. All that sketching and doodling in the margins that I used to do when I was younger, it got me to home plate to meet the captain of the Yankees." And he said, "Of all my kids, I was not expecting you to be the one to do that." So anyway, it was a very fun moment. And I do think that being in New York definitely helped.
Yeah.
I think it would have been a costly trip if I'd come from anywhere else. So
So you mentioned sketching and doodling. It just sounds like you've always drawn,
yes.
that you've always drawn. I wonder, now that you're doing other projects, some of which involve video and film and digital tools, I wonder what you think about maybe this is a silly question, but I don't know enough about the world that you're in, but is drawing still crucial? Old-fashioned drawing, I mean, pen and paper or pencil and paper, or do you think the kids coming up today don't do more things on a pad or on a screen, and is that more how it's taught today, or is drawing still where it's at?
I think there is definitely, if you want to become an illustrator, if you want to get better at drawing, pencil and paper is still going to be the best tool because an iPad can do a lot of amazing things, but it's also a tool. And unless you know how to draw without it, if you can't really draw with a piece of paper and a pencil, you're not going to get more amazing results on an iPad. It's not really going to do the work for you. So I can share some work that is, and I don't know if everyone can see, but these are, all of these sketches are really, it's really just the same kind of drawing that I would be doing with colored pencil, or I feel like Vanna White. I can, it's the basics in play, but I'm able to use an iPad or use a computer with something like Photoshop because I spent years training myself with charcoal and ink and other, just sort of more basic tools that, maybe aren't as exciting, but still very, very valuable. this I've always had sensitive skin since I was young, and so this is someone who also has sensitive skin and sat on a chair with some unfortunate results, but a sort of a patriotic image. So anyway, to answer your question, so much of what I do today, even though it is on an iPad or a computer, is really just the tools and skills I developed working with more traditional media. The only reason why I think a computer or an iPad is an attractive option these days is because there is a certain amount of speed that comes from working with these digital tools. I can also share my screen real quick and show you one of the other benefits of working digitally, which is that I can record. And can everyone see? I don't know.
Yep.
Okay. So every time I draw on an iPad, it will capture every mark that I make, and it will record it, and then it can play it back like a video. So you can see all the choices that I make. So this is a drawing that I did of a younger version of myself playing video games, which I used to do so much when I was little. And my mom always used to tell me to not sit so close to the screen. So this is an exaggeration of that. I didn't usually sit this close, but I sat pretty close. But this is one of the perks of working digitally, is that you can really kind of show your process, which when I go into schools or do events, I can show kids, how I start and how I use shapes. And a lot of the tools actually do a really good job of creating the feeling of a pencil. It actually kind of looks like graphite. So, so this is that illustration. And a fun thing about this is that I actually shared this on my social media channels, and a fan of mine all the way in Australia turned it into a Pixar level 3D image of this little version of me. I woke up and I got this as an email, and I jumped out of bed. I was so unbelievably excited. And that's a pretty special thing that happens, from sharing your work online and that kind of thing. So sorry, I kind of danced around your question.
Can you tell us what social media you're on, and is it Instagram or what other platforms?
Instagram is my main platform. That's usually where most of the work that I share is posted. I'm also on Twitter, but really Instagram is the main channel. And there's been some other pretty amazing things that have happened. This is an image that I did for a personal project that I'm developing. And it's for a slightly older audience. But one of the more amazing things that happened is, I'll share my screen again. Someone in Spain turned it into a 3D model. So it took my two-dimensional sketch, and then because of 3D printing and technology, I was able to print that out and hold my sketch as a 3D sculpture, which now sits on my desk.
That's amazing.
So there's been some pretty amazing things when it comes to art and technology and that kind of thing. But again, it's all about the basics. You gotta learn your pencil and your paper first before you can get to those bigger.
So we're about 20 minutes in. Did you want to do a demonstration, or did you want to show more images, or what do you?
I can show some more images. I can show just some examples of the work that I usually do. A lot of the work that I do is for kids. This is a series that I'm working on right now with little kids and these single color lions that I'm hoping to turn into a children's book one day about emotions and feelings and that kind of thing. I also kind of love to draw dogs whenever I don't know what I want to draw. It's sort of one of the things that I enjoy most. If I can't think of something else to draw, this is of a dog family. I don't know if you can see all the little puppies and that kind of thing.
Tom, when you're working on an idea, and then that idea gets maybe developed into a book or something else, do you maintain creative control, or do you have to sort of, is it a give and take about the story, and how do you deal with that?
It's a really good question. So this is a slightly scary image that I developed for a book that came out a year and a half ago with Candlewick. So I created this character, and for the most part, the publisher was very happy, but the hat was a sticking point. I created, I think, something like 5 or 6 hats, and we had to go back and forth until everyone was happy with it. And I can show a sneak peek of some other projects that I'm developing that are stories of my own. So 1 second. So right now I have a book with Simon and Schuster that I'm working on. It's about a dog named Big Walter. And we've had to go over his design quite a bit. So this is sort of a rough idea for a cover, but I've gone through, I think, something like 15 or 16 drafts, because when you're writing for a kid, you know, every year is such a major, they go through so many changes. And it's really hard to find a story that will appeal to a 3-year-old that will also appeal to a 6-year-old. So to answer your question, a lot of those changes will usually come through when I'm writing the story, and then also with the art itself. Sometimes you have to, you know, change a character's hat 7 times, just because they're going for a very specific look. This is another personal story that I'm developing that I'm hoping to pitch soon. You know, I have to go through my agent. I have to write a story. I have to craft a character. There's another fun thing about this particular image. Another fan, this fan was in, I think, Argentina. Sorry, I have to move my, animated the character. So that was really special. So when I go to the publisher, I can show them that as well. And usually the way it works when you're pitching a story is you write the story out, and you try and get as close as you can to whatever the final version of that will be. But you don't fully finish the idea, because a publisher wants to be able to see that they can work with you. They want to see an idea that could be molded a little bit and can be tweaked for their audience. Very rarely do you hear of someone who writes a book from beginning to end, and then the publisher says, we don't want to do anything. Right. This is perfect. I will say that actually happened with Don't Blink, which was a shock to me. And I was very flattered, but I don't imagine that happening again in my lifetime. So
I suppose in some ways it's like a writer relationship with an editor. I mean, you have to be open to suggestions. If you're not willing to at least collaborate a little bit, it sounds like it would be difficult to do this kind of work.
Absolutely. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that more often than not, in my experience, you know, the more you work with groups, the better the work itself becomes. That's one of the reasons why I enjoy the process so much, is it's that collaborative aspect. And I think, you know, I was forced to work with Anne on projects I seem to recall in college, and it's very difficult for me and very emotional. But no, with my classmates.
For your therapy, okay? I'm paying for your therapy. So
I know, and I do appreciate that. No, but it was you know, those social skills that I developed were crucial to helping me be able to sort of defend myself. You know, sometimes you have to really defend your ideas. You know, if you have a story that you love, you have to be able to stand up for your creative vision sometimes. Sometimes you put an idea that you know that they'll hate just because you want to distract them from something else that you really like and want to protect. So, but yes, really, you have to be able to have those interpersonal skills. So, but I can also share I have another video that maybe everyone will enjoy. This is another process video. And this can just show you, and then after this, maybe I can do a quick sketch and just talk to you a little bit about how I approach a drawing and that kind of thing. Can everyone see the screen again?
I can see it, yep.
Okay, so this is a drawing I did recently. And so for any of the young drawers on the call in this Zoom meeting, you can see how I start very lightly, and I'm moving I don't draw this quickly. This is sped up, but I do draw very quickly. I try and make mistakes early. I try and put down ideas and really see if I like them. And if I don't, then I just erase them straight away. Not every idea that you make is going to be your best idea. So sometimes you have to do a lot of trial and error. And so you can see I'm drawing very softly. That way I can sort of build up the darker tones in the drawing. And then I'm adding color and little details here and there, little pinks, little changes in color and that kind of thing. And I'm not being too strict about whether or not the work goes outside the silhouette of my character. It's adding a little bit of texture and that kind of thing. So that's just another video that I thought everyone might enjoy. And now what I can do is I can share the screen and start doing a sketch and show you actually how I start a sketch from beginning. And I don't know how far we'll get. I tend to draw relatively slow unless I've had a lot of coffee. But this will hopefully be useful to anyone who is interested in seeing how I approach drawing. So this is my little brush set. So in this program called Photoshop, I have brushes that I can make them really, really big, and I can do a line like that, or I have other ones that are designed to look like brushes, a different kind of brush. So you can do something like that. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to tell the computer, that's a little bit too much pigment, a little bit too much color. So let's bring it down. And let's have it behave a little bit more like a pencil. So I'm telling it to sort of not put so much, digital ink down on the page, if you will. So that way, when I start to sketch, you can see it's much lighter, and then it will build up over time as I do that, as I develop it. So 1 second, let me set myself up again. Okay. And so right now, I think what I'm going to do, unless there are any requests, I can start drawing a bear, which is I'm sort of slowly developing an idea for a children's book about a bear. And so I'm just going to start playing around with that. And you can see I'm moving pretty quickly. I can also turn the screen. So I apologize if this is a little disorienting, but whenever I'm drawing something, I always kind of tilt the page a little bit. It's a little more pleasing to my eye. So I can, tilt the screen, snap it back, and then maybe I have to look a little smile in there. And I can also move the drawing on the page a little bit, just another benefit of working digitally. But if I don't like that, I can just quickly erase it. And I might change the eyes just a little bit, a little bit smaller. Okay. And then I have a body. So I'm going to put in some big shoulders because it's a bear. And kind of a big belly because bears are kind of like big dogs whenever you think about it. If you're ever drawing one, you can tell that they have similar noses to dogs, and they tend to eat a lot more, but for the most part, they resemble dogs, I think. I grew up with dogs, so I'm pretty comfortable with their proportions. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm drawing the legs, drawing the feet, and trying to keep it really simple. I'm trying not to overthink anything. I want to, make sure that my shapes are big and easy to read. I have a little tail. And again, I can go back over any of this. If I'm not happy with it, if I was working with a pencil and a piece of paper, I would probably, take this drawing a little farther or further, excuse me. And then I would, probably get a new piece of paper and I would try it again. This is a little trick I can do. I can sort of warp it, and I can actually warp the whole drawing itself if I want to. So this is sort of another thing that I can play around with. And the whole value of this is that I can move very, very, very quickly. Because when I'm making a children's book, I actually just got an email before we had our call from my art director, and I'm working on a book with a princess, a wizard, an ogre, multiple goblins, what else? A hamster, and there's something else in there. Oh, just like a little kid. And I have to, oh, I'm sorry, hedgehog stickers. So I have to basically be able to draw things very quickly because there's a lot to draw, first of all. And also because the sooner I can put something down and share it with my publisher, the sooner we can all sort of reach a look that we like for that particular story or that project. So
Tom, I wanted to, can you field a question while you're drawing?
Yeah, actually, this is the one thing I can't do a lot, as you know, in life. But one thing I can do is draw and talk. So I'm happy to answer any questions as they
I was
come.
just curious. You know, you say you're toying with this idea of you've got this idea of a book about bears. You've got you're drawing the bear. Does the story come first, or do the drawings come first, or do they come sort of concurrently together?
It really varies. It changes every time. More often than not, I will create a character and then that will inspire a story. So the story for Bert's Birds, the man with all the birds, I drew that image and it just stuck with me. There was something about it that I really liked. The bear, by the way, for my story that I'm thinking of is slightly purple. So I'm gonna make this one purple. And so I drew a picture of Bert and it just stuck with me. There was something about it that I really liked. And I actually grew up just outside Philadelphia, and near my home, there was a restaurant that was run by a man named Albert. And I've known him my entire life, and he's a chef. And it just sort of, for some reason, all of a sudden I started to piece together this story about a chef named Bert. And I'll spoil the story because I don't know if it's going to get sold. And hopefully it does. But even if it doesn't, then I'll at least have one audience that will be able to listen to it. And the story is that there's a chef named Bert. He's the greatest chef in the entire world. He feeds customers from all over the planet. They wait hours, sometimes days in line for his food. But his favorite thing to do at the end of every day is he collects all the crumbs from the meals that he serves, and he takes them up to the top of this mountain where he feeds the birds. And then one day a bird shows up that doesn't eat his food. It's the first time in his entire career that his food has ever been rejected. And so he starts this quest to sort of figure out what this bird will eat. And he starts to obsess over it. He starts to close the restaurant early so that he can try and make this bird happy. And anyway, it turns out that this bird just likes to eat alone, which is the reason why I want to eat any of his food. So it's a long answer to your question, but more often than not, it starts with a character and then a story slowly grows from that. Just a little explanation as to what I'm doing now. So this program allows me to put a color on top of whatever image I'm creating, and I can tell it that I don't want it to go outside the silhouette of that image. So what that means is if I'm making a line right here and I go outside of the silhouette, it stops. So it's a good way for me to sort of control things and move a little bit faster. And then I can also change that color sort of at any time. So let me see. So
Tom, it's Ann. Can I ask you another question?
Feel free. The more
All right,
merrier.
so first I see in the chat, Larry Kerr, or Carr, sorry, Larry, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Class of 68 asks, are you drawing with a pen on a Wacom tablet? I don't know.
I am. Yeah. So the screen that I have looks a lot like, well, it looks a little bit like other computer screens, but I'm allowed to draw directly on top of it. And so that is makes things a lot easier, because it used to be that you'd have to draw on a tablet that was separate from your computer whenever you wanted to draw digitally, and then they came out with one that was for where you could draw directly on the screen. So it makes things much, much easier. So right now I'm going to go back over the lines that I have for the bear, because I'm going to eventually get rid of the lines that I did before as sort of my rough sketch. And I'll go like this. And again, moving quickly is kind of a good thing. It's okay to have those mistakes. It kind of gives your drawing a little bit of an energy. So when I'm sort of giving tips on how to improve your drawing and that kind of thing, going slow can sometimes work against you. So it's usually helpful sometimes to work quickly and embrace your mistakes.
And Tom, it sounds like the ideas for your stories and characters are all drawn from your life. You know, the bear is in a way inspired by your love of dogs, and the chef was a real, I mean, they're put together, you know, in your mind, but do you always draw from people you knew and experiences you have? And
yeah, I think for the most part, I like the Christmas book that I did, This is Christmas, was inspired by a chipmunk that visited our house when I was growing up. Now, I think my family was under the impression that this was the same chipmunk that had been visiting us and that we had a special relationship. It turns out that chipmunks don't live that long. And so I think that was, but in my head, it was the same chipmunk. And so the This is Christmas book is actually dedicated to Chippy, which is what we used to call him. So yeah, so yes, I think that for the most part, my work is inspired by, or the stories that I'm interested in, or the ones that I create are inspired by things that I've experienced.
And it's kind of amazing how the most commonplace thing, or the most, you know, sort of everyday thing can become a magical story, you know, with the right pictures and I mean, it doesn't have to be exotic. It can be just something you see or something you remember.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it helps to, when you're trying to learn how to draw or trying to learn how to create stories, it helps to start with what you know, because writing is hard enough, and I think that that's a good place to start for anyone who's trying to develop that skill.
Hey, Tom, can you speak a little bit more about your experience as an author, because and what you would recommend? I've got one couple years away from college still, but you know, wants to be an author at some point. Like, do you have any recommendations on academically what's the right path from a major perspective, and what your experience has been?
I would say it's a kind of a tough question for me to answer, because I think a lot of my education for that served me when I was pitching my books came from basically just learning to write at Hamilton. I mean, I think whatever major is going to get you writing, and really just spending time with getting your ideas on paper, is probably the best approach. I mean, obviously an English major would feel like an appropriate fit, but I was a history major, and I mean, everyone in Hamilton knows that involves a lot of writing. So I think that served me pretty well. And I think that if you're trying to break through, then one of the things you have to do is whatever you're trying to do. If you're trying to be the writer, you're trying to be an illustrator, you're trying to be both, it really comes down to just spending that time and developing that confidence with the skill set. So I hope that helps answer the question, but it is one of those things that it takes time. It took me a while to break through. And so I think that's just something to also keep in mind, is to not get discouraged.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And then also when you're ready, when you feel like you have something that you're excited to share and that kind of thing, more often than not, getting an agent is the next step. But that's sort of a whole other conversation, which might be a little too specific for what we're discussing today.
Tom, it's Anne again.
Oh, geez, here we go.
So this technology that you're using, I'm sure it's super affordable. So for all the parents whose kids are watching and asking them if they can get them this technology, I'm sure that's easy. But if we're somebody who's more analog, do you have specific brands or specific writing tools or paper items that you use that you really recommend? And then we can write those companies and make sure you get a cut of the profits.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, to get a computer that can run Photoshop, actually that's probably not as challenging lately as it used to be. But you know, it's an investment, and then the same thing goes for an iPad. So the advice that I would give is to go to your local art store, and there are some recognizable brands like Winsor Newton and that kind of thing. Honestly and truly, if it makes a mark, it's less about the materials that you create, that you're using, and more about your time spent with that skill. The time will come for you to sort of pick up more advanced tools and that kind of thing. But if you're really kind of just starting out, there is really nothing better than pencil and a piece of paper. Because think about it this way. If you go out and buy the nicest paints in the world, but you don't know what to do with them, you're kind of stuck. And if you can instead take out a piece of paper and with just a pencil, which is just gray, really, and create an image that you're excited about, that is, you know, saying what you want it to say, that is far more challenging, and that is going to be a much faster way for you to learn how to then feel more comfortable with more advanced tools when you're ready for them. But it's, you know, it's you wouldn't want to learn riding a bike without the training wheels first. You're gonna get hurt. And you know, if you're trying to rush your creative process too much, it might be a little bit painful just to sort of see something that you have that's very clear in your mind, but you can't quite get it down on paper. So I really strongly encourage budding artists to really, you know, anything that makes a mark and anything that your parents will allow you to mark up, do that. And just 15 minutes a day. Start with that. Like 15 minutes a day. Just make sure that by the end of the day, you've spent 15 minutes, and then maybe next week you raise it 30 minutes. And then after that, you raise it to an hour. Because like other skills, you know, drawing, it takes time. It takes time to do a drawing, and it takes time to get better at a drawing. So patience is patience and practice are the two things that you know, aspiring artists should really take away.
That's good advice, Tom. Especially in the world we live in, which kind of fetishizes all these great things that you can buy, no matter what you're interested in. You got to do it first, and you don't need the most expensive and fanciest stuff. But we've got maybe 15 minutes to go, and I know some people want to ask some questions. So I don't know if we're going to get to every question, but we're going to try to give people an opportunity. So I'm going to call some names. And the first question is from Betty, and she's class of 93. Is that right?
Hi, Betty.
Are you there, Betty?
Yes, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Hi, Betty.
You're on.
Hi. Oh, well, I asked my more important question. My silly question was, what was the joke that you told Derek Jeter?
Oh boy. Okay. Well, so when I met him, he's about my height. I'm about just about 6'4", and he's a pretty striking guy, Derek Jeter. For the younger people who are watching, Derek Jeter was the captain of the Yankees. It's like one of the most famous baseball teams in the whole world, and he was the captain. He was the guy. And I was in home plate on the field, which is the place that most other people would want to be. I, however, was a little bit out of my element. But anyway, he comes out in full uniform, and he comes up to me, and I had a guide with me who was sort of making sure that I was going to the right places and that kind of thing. Anyway, he came up and said to my guide, you know, how are the kids? So immediately I know that they know each other, they have a rapport, and you know, she says the kids are great. She says, how are you doing? This is before he had kids of his own. And he says, oh, I'm good. I just got back from Milwaukee. And she said, well, how was it? And he says, well, it's Milwaukee. And I hear this and I thought, oh, he's got a sense of humor. So you have to understand, when I get nervous, I'm probably doing it a little bit now. I perspire, I turn red in the face. I will never be a gambler because you can tell if I'm, you know, trying to have a poker face. Anyway, and I thought I would make a joke. And the only thing that I could think of was an inside joke that I had with my friends growing up, which was not even funny. But again, because I was panicking, I picked the first thing that I could think of. And I said, well, I've heard that Milwaukee is the fillet of the states, which the fact that it doesn't even make sense. It was, you know, it needs an explanation. So he says, I don't follow. Now, a smart person would have said, don't worry about it. Have a great game and leave it at that. I, however, dive a little bit deeper and I raise up my hands and I say, well, filet, it's like, you know, it's like a steak. And I'm explaining my joke. So if you were to visualize this as an illustrator, you would probably draw an airplane doing a corkscrew, just, you know, spiraling down. Anyway, and I'm looking at my hands and I look up at his face and he's looking at me like I didn't go to Hamilton College, that I probably never went to college. And I realized the mistake that I've made and I said, you know what? You've got a match to play. You should get out there. And after he left, my guide was like, oh, that was interesting. It was an interesting way to end it. And I was convinced that I wasn't going to get the job at that point. But it turns out that I made such a bad impression that he remembered me, which was a big deal because he's such a celebrity that he meets so many people. He actually sent an email around saying that he said there was a sweaty bearded man on the field talking about steak, was everything on the up and up with security. And they said, oh, that's Tom. He likes drawing unicorns. He's perfectly harmless. You might be working with him. Don't worry about it. And, you know, before you know it, I actually got the job. So the lesson that I'll tell my grandkids is like, as long as your work is good, make sure that your work is good and you're prepared and you're nice to people in that you can maybe not make the best first impression. But anyway, that was the joke.
All right. I was wondering the same thing. I'm glad we got that. We got the real story. So the next question is from Larry, class of 68. Larry, are you there? Did we lose Larry? We can go.
Yeah, here, sorry.
No, it's okay.
It was just a follow-on question to the Wacom tablet. How big is it that you work with every day?
How big is the tablet itself?
Yeah.
It's a 22 inches. So it's one of the bigger screens.
So it's almost something on an easel, really.
Yeah, and it's an older model. I've had it for about 15 years now, and I'm probably due for an upgrade. But it's done right by me all these years, so I can't say goodbye to it just yet. But yeah, it's one of the bigger ones. So, but I'm kind of a bigger guy, and so I think I needed something that was a little bit on the bigger side.
That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
So next is Emma, and then on deck is Callie, just to give you a heads up. So
Okay.
Emma, class of 06.
Yeah,
Are
hi
you there?
Emma. Hi Emma, it's good to see you. Oh,
Can people hear Emma?
I
Oh,
can't
can you hear me now?
Yep. Hi there.
Hi. We're big fans, and Isaiah is hoping that you will read one of your books when you're done drawing. Is that possible?
Okay. Yeah, I could read one of my books. Let me see.
Thank you.
Of course.
And then, great. And then Callie, are you there, Callie, class of 16?
Hi, I'm here. I just wanted to know a bit more about your process and whether you worked mostly from imagination or used references. I know you probably had to use references for Who Wins, which I used to recommend
Yes.
all the time to people at the bookstore that I worked at. So.
Oh yeah, that's Who Wins. Thank you for by the way.
You're welcome.
Who Wins is like a fun history book. It is about what if historical figures faced off against each other, and based on their skills and their talents, who would win in a pie eating contest, who would win in a race, a race car kind of situation. So that was actually one of the first. That was the second book that I ever illustrated. And in terms of my process, sorry, the first part of your question was a process question.
Mm-hmm. I was just wondering how often you draw from imagination versus using references.
Oh yeah, okay. So normally what I try and do is I try and draw from my imagination first. So if I have an idea, the first thing that I'll do is I will draw it as I see it in my head. And then after that, depending on what it's for, more often than not, I will look up a bunch of reference on what I'm trying to create, just to make sure that, my anatomy is looking the way it should. And, because I think if everyone in this Zoom chat were to draw a bear, let's say, from your imagination, we would get a lot of very different looking bears, which I think is one of the great things about drawing. But if it's for an assignment, then I have to sometimes make sure that I'm being anatomically correct and that kind of thing. And then once I have sort of the anatomy nailed down, then I will kind of try and find a middle ground between the two, where it's the stylized version of what I saw in my head, and then the more accurate version of what it would look like in real life. And that's sort of the fun, sometimes tedious part about making an illustration, which is sometimes that can come very quickly, and sometimes it takes a lot of trial and error. So.
Great. I have another question. How long after you sign with a publisher do you have to deliver projects?
That also varies. Right now, the book, I can actually show you some pages from the book that I'm working on for Random House. Don't tell them, I'll get in trouble. But I have about 3 months to develop that. And that's sort of unusual. More often than not, it's more like 6 months, but this you can see is a spread from the book that I'm working on for them. This is actually part of the story. I'm not vandalizing my own work. But one of the things that I'll do is I'll do, a line like that. And then I'll know where my gutter is. For those of you who aren't familiar with book terminology, the gutter is where the binding of the book is, and you always want to avoid drawing right in the gutter. So I'll sort of keep that as a reminder for myself. Anyway, this is sort of going back to the reason why I like to work digitally, because I have to be very quick, and sometimes publishers, if they deliberate a lot on what a book should be, then that means less time for you to have to really take it further. So I would say, to answer your question, probably about 3 to 6 months. Sometimes you get more than that. Sometimes they'll give you like a year, but not really in my experience.
Tom, are you happy with your drawing?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, as long as everyone else is happy, I'm fine.
No, it's been great to see this take shape from the first light, very brushy, vague lines to something that really is. It's there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just because I've been practicing so much. I think
This is what I do.
gotten pretty quick. Yeah. So, but also I can, once I have 3 of something, then I can multiply that, multiply it again. So we got, that might be too many, but anyway. But yeah, so I'm actually fairly happy with how this turned out. So are there any other questions?
Cool. It's very cool.
Thank you.
Actually, I think now would be a good time if you want to do the, for story time.
Oh yeah, okay, that sounds good.
That might be a good way to wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
We're
Okay.
Mr.
Oh.
Bruce.
Yeah, I think I hear a voice.
Yeah, what's your, go ahead.
It's Amelia.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Dad, it's Amelia.
My name is Amelia Terry.
Hi, Amelia.
Meet you.
She looks like she's drawing.
I like when you draw Harvey. I like that book.
Oh, you're drawing Harvey the elephant? Oh,
No.
thank you very much.
No, I'm not drawing. It's a different.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, thank you for joining. I really appreciate that.
That's her favorite book. Hi, Tom. It's Sarah Terry.
Hi, Sarah. How's it going?
I just wanted to say hi. We love your book.
Georgie.
And this is Georgie.
Very nice. Well, I'm so glad you could join. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you for the
Let's see if I
story.
can-
There's Daddy Andrew. Daddy Andrew Terry.
We're going to go off mute. Thank you, Tom.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thanks for coming. So I'm going to see if I have, so I wish I had a PDF because I don't know if I'll be able to show the book. It might not appear. Let me see. Is this going to, no, it kind of disappears. So I have to.
It goes in and out, like, I don't know.
So let me actually turn off my background and you can see how messy my little studio is. So 1 second. Sorry, everybody. Okay. Okay. Can everyone see me? Okay, so this is called Day at the Beach. This is one that I wrote and illustrated. All right. And this one, I dedicated this book to my family. I tend to do that quite a bit because they've been very, very supportive of me for, you know, the unusual career that I've chosen for myself. And here we go. One sunny morning on a quiet sandy beach, as sleepy seagulls swooped and swayed to the soothing sound of the waves, Gideon and his sister Audrey raced towards the ocean. Look out! Make way! Every summer, Gideon and Audrey would build a sandcastle together. Gideon made sure each tower stood straight, every wall was level, and all the castle's sides were smooth. Audrey made sure the castle sparkled with shells, sea glass, and a starfish on the top. But this summer, Gideon had a different plan. He was going to build the most stupendous sandcastle the beach had ever seen, alone, all by himself. No Audrey. And can everyone see? I don't know if you can see, this is Gideon's castle, and that's his drawing of himself. And then this is Audrey outside the castle. He's not including her this time. Does anyone have any siblings who sometimes leave them out of things? That was my brother and sister did that to me sometimes. So anyway, sandcastles are serious business, he told his sister. Go play with mom and dad. The new king of the beach has work to do. Gideon started digging, shoveling, burrowing, tunneling, piling, and scooping. He made sure each tower stood straight and every wall was level. And just as he smoothed out the sides of the castle, heads up, kid. Sorry, kid. Next time, don't build so close to our game. That was just a practice castle, Gideon replied. He picked up his tools, walked farther down the beach, and started all over again. Sorry, this is intermission. Gideon made sure each tower stood straight and every wall was level. And just when he smoothed out the sides of the castle, whoomp, his second castle didn't last much longer than his first. Can anyone see what happened? It was one of the kites that flew into it. His third castle would have been perfect, but it was swept away with the tide. His fourth castle would have won awards, but it shrank beneath a passing shower. His fifth castle was almost legendary, but it flew away with a strong breeze. And his sixth castle, woof.
Oh.
That's it. Gideon's patience had run out. He grabbed his bucket and shovel, then set out to look for a new spot. where nothing and no one could interrupt him. And finally he found one. Perfect, Gideon said. He quickly got to work. Wait until Audrey sees this. I am truly the king. Gideon built and he built and he built, and then he built some more. He made sure each tower stood straight and every wall was level, and as he smoothed out the sides of the castle, everyone on the beach started to walk over. Awesome. Whoa. Come and see what this kid has built. You are the king of the beach. How did you do that all by yourself? Gideon loved the crowd's chants and cheers, but then he spotted Audrey building a sandcastle with their mom and dad. And suddenly Gideon was feeling very lonely. He jumped down and walked across the beach. Audrey's castle didn't have straight towers, level walls, or smooth sides, but it did look like fun. Gideon glanced over his shoulder at his castle, then looked at Audrey's. Room for one more? He asked. Audrey grabbed the bucket from her big brother. On one condition, she said with a grin. We finished building it together. And then the last image is the sunset. The end.
Great.
That's great.
Thank you. So,
Thanks, Tom.
thank you all for coming.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. That was fabulous. And I know everybody really enjoyed it. That was wonderful. I just want to toss it back to the founding member of Tom Booth's fan club, Dick Tantillo, just to wrap it up. But thank you all for coming.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. I have two messages. The first one from my friend Tom. Hey, Tom, forget all this talk of you are our hero.
Wait, Dick, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
You need to.
It's there. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
A little better, yeah.
Can you hear me now? I said nice things about you, Tom. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Everybody see? Yeah, you. Hey, I thank everybody for indulging me here just for a minute at the end. One for our friend Tom and change your mind.
Can you hear him?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No?
Now.
Can you not? I think something's wrong with my, can you hear me?
Yes.
No. I'm sorry, this is, sounds like I'm breaking up.
That's
There you are.
much better.
Am I
There you
breaking up?
are.
There you are.
Lean really close to your computer.
And I do these Zoom calls all the time. I've never had this problem before. Hear me now? Everybody shake their head. Yes. Yeah. No. Nancy Huckabee looks like you can't hear me. I can only see Nancy's face. This isn't working. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry. Never mind. We love you,
That's
Tom.
fine.
Sorry.
That's fine. I can read Dick's mind, and I know that what Dick wanted to say was a huge heartfelt thank you for Tom. Tom, you were great. Thank you so much. Jake Muirhead, thank you so much for moderating. You were awesome. And just a reminder to everyone who loves Hamilton that the fund year closes tomorrow at midnight. And if you haven't yet made a gift to Hamilton, there's still time. We are also still working off the match, $250,000 in support of diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives and scholarship aid. So if anybody needs the link to give. It's on Hamilton's website. And we thank you all for coming out, and all the kids have been great and adorable. And Tom, that purple bear, I actually have one question.
Yes.
Is it easy for you to make that bear again?
Well, you might have just jinxed me, but yes, I think I could do it. Yeah, I think, I mean, I've drawn it a couple times. This was the first time. And this is, you know, normally I'm a little bit cautious about sharing ideas, but I actually had a conversation with a friend, and he stumbled with his words, and he meant to say grizzly bear, but he said grizzle bear. And that, as soon as I heard it, I was like, that could be something for a story. So, you know, that's the kind of thing you got to keep your ear out for when you're, you know.
Very cool.
So, but yeah, that I could probably, this one's a little bit more developed, obviously. This is I love this Vanna White thing. This is great. This is like, so yeah, I think I could, if you need another purple bear,
I know where to go.
You let me know. Also, I almost forgot. I did have a book that came out last week. It's called Library Books Are Not for Eating. It is with Random House.
I've been doing it wrong this whole time.
I know. The fun thing about this one, this is my first book with a die cut cover, so there are actually holes in the cover itself, little bite marks. And I can show you some spreads from that. But if anyone has a love of books and books that you can eat and that kind of thing, sorry, I should get out of the way. This is a brand new book that's out. So I meant to mention that before, and I totally forgot. And my publisher made sure to tell me to make sure you mention the book. So anyway.
Tom, if you could put the website or the link in the chat, we'll grab that and then share it with people who are interested.
Great. That sounds good. Thank you.
Great.
All right.
Great. Thanks again, Tom.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you
Great.
for moderating. It was so good to see so many familiar faces, and I hope everyone starts drawing for 15 minutes a day starting tomorrow or tonight. But thank you. This was special, and it's good to see some smiling faces. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.